I appreciate your invitation, and it's a pleasure indeed to share the platform with such distinguished guests and to appear before you, this audience. It's been quite some time, and it's good to be back. Of course, there are times that I sort of have to take a break from the situation to sit and renew my thoughts and to sort of try to put on the written records some of the rationales that we may need to pursue our advancement as a people. I am currently involved in writing on the subject matter of the education of the black child, a rationale for an African-centered education. So if you don't see me too often, it's not because I've given up at all. It's because I'm just dedicating myself to this movement in a way that I think is in line with my talents. So I'm still with you. Now, the evening, of course, is passing very rapidly, so I will not consume a great deal of your time, and I will just sort of run through the outline of the text of my speech that I had prepared here today, dealing with the black adolescents and black-on-black violence. And of course, I congratulate Brother Lambe for the title here, How White Society Promotes Violence Within the African Community. I often, in talking to students, try to get our students to understand the political game behind courses in the universities and in our schools that appear to be superficially non-political. And I try to get them to understand that everything is political, that there even is a politics of science, so that we can talk about a black physics and black chemistry and black mathematics and black engineering and the whole bit, because all of these things occur within a political, social context to achieve political and social ends. And when you are taught those courses, whether it's engineering or mathematics or what have you, without those courses being connected to a political context, then you are being politicized, and you're being politicized in a way to support the dominant system, and in this instance, to support white domination. So it becomes very important that whatever we talk about it in context, because the major ruse that is used in the academies is to decontextualize subject matter. That is, to take subject matter out of context and to project it as race neutral and objective. So, as a matter of fact, when you read your newspapers, you will see the same kind of game going on. You will get discussions of black-on-black violence, the homicide among our young men, and you will get half explanations or half-truths, such as these young men are killing each other because of the availability of guns. You know, somehow it's just the mere availability of guns that's causing black-on-black homicide, or just the selling of drugs, or other half explanations. We have to watch out for that, because often the other half is the most important one, the one that is left out. How are the guns distributed? Who manufactures them? Who sells them? And the whole bit. Who imports the drugs? Who distributes the drugs? Or it's the cause of poverty. Crime is caused by poverty, caused by poor family background. We get a whole plethora of these kind of half-truth definitions. These Guns are made available within a social political context. Drugs are made available within a social political context. Families are broken apart within a social political context. Poverty is created within a social political context. Poor education is the result of a social political context, ladies and gentlemen. And we must constantly then look at that context and see how it creates the conditions of which we complain so much. We must then recognize, as we begin to look at black upon black violence, we must see that violence and its connections to a racist society. And we must come to understand what a racist society is about. We use that term so often without analyzing it very well. And we must recognize essentially then that a racist society is about structuring social and political, economic circumstances, psychological and cultural circumstances, such that one race can take advantage of another. And one race can enhance itself at the expense of another. It has little to do with overt race hatred, or with negative racial attitudes, or with the projection of racial stereotypes, or as Brother Harris says, with whites not understanding the nature of their racism. That's not it. And when you define it in terms of attitudes, you'll find yourself then solving the wrong problems. These people will stop expressing those negative attitudes, you see. They will smile more regularly at you. They will even marry you and go to bed with you, sleep with you. But you will note that the effects of racism, the effects of poverty, and all of these other things will continue. But not only do they continue, they increase. Ultimately, you must recognize that racism involves the power of one race to impose its will upon another. That ultimately then it is about power. And we have to face that fact. Whites engage in racism because they have the power to do so. And if we are to end white racism, then we must end white power. We use the word imperialistic society and imperialism often, also without looking at it very deeply and looking at the term very deeply. Imperialism of empire. Speaking then of a group of people who through various means have acquired and maintained an empire, who maintain and exploit control over populations much larger than themselves. We heard a reference here tonight about this population being 5%, the white population here of the world, and about the total European population being about 10%, yet in control of 80% of the world's economic resources and in control of the other 90% of the world's populations. You're talking about empire then, ladies and gentlemen. And what does that imply? That means then you have a small population that is ruling over populations that are much, much, much larger than it is. And of course, we don't have time to talk about the psychology of this, but I've often indicated that this can only be possible when that small population maintains the larger populations in a state of false consciousness and in a state of deception. That this small population can only maintain control over those larger populations by outright lying and the falsification of reality. But recognize, in essence then, in terms of the problems we are talking about here this evening, the Colin Powells, the black soldiers in the armies, you have to recognize that the essential nature of imperialism is that due to the fact that the imperialist group or nation that runs the empire is so